This podcast is made possible by your support and your donations. Thank you. And by the purchase of my book called Everyday Buddhism, Real Life Buddhist Teachings and Practices for Real Change. I will post an affiliate link to the book on Amazon in the show notes. And if you've already read it, please take a minute to rate and review. And also consider purchasing it again for a friend or family member as a gift. Welcome to Everyday Buddhism, making every day better by applying the proven tools found in Buddhist concepts. Welcome to episode 117 of Everyday Buddhism, Making Every Day Better. I am excited to share this conversation with Henry Shukman, a Zen master in the Sanbo Zen lineage and spiritual director emeritus at Mountain Cloud Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Henry is the co-founder of The Way meditation app and founder of the Original Love meditation program. He is the author of the books Original Love, The 4 Inns on the Path of Awakening, and One Blade of Grass, a Zen Memoir, among other award-winning and best-selling books of poetry and fiction. Henry has taught meditation at Google and Harvard Business School and poetry at the Institute of American Indian Arts. His poetry has appeared in The New Yorker and The Guardian, and his essays in The New York Times, Outside, and Tricycle. Henry has a master's degree from Cambridge and a Master of Letters degree from St. Andrews. As this biographical summary makes obvious, it's not like Henry hasn't been quite discoverable as a writer and meditation teacher, but I only recently discovered him. And once I did, he has had a profound influence on me as both a teacher and writer. In my upcoming conversation with him, I'll talk more about how I discovered him on Sam Harris's Waking Up app and how he has become a primary teacher to me, even though we've never met. So stay tuned. In the conversation, we talked about a wide range of things, including the 4 Inns on the Path of Awakening, which is the subtitle of his book, Original Love, and that inns is referring to lodging, or in this case, refuge or shelter on the path of meditation. And his 4 inns are mindfulness, support, absorption, and awakening. We talk about meditation as a journey or path rather than an intervention, as Henry would say. He called it a journey of a lifetime. We talked about Kensho, or seeing the timeless, primordial, or non-dual awareness that is the core of our very being. We also talked about the importance of support in our practice, whether it is the support of a teacher, a community, or a friend. We talk about absorption or flow states in meditation, and the love Henry refers to as something endemic to our existence, a great sense of belonging or union with everything, and so much more. So I know you will enjoy this conversation and Henry's clear, authentic, and gentle teaching style, that I suspect it will influence you too to bring more of Henry's guidance into your Dharma and meditation practice. The conversation starts now. Hello, Henry. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I talked to you before we started recording, but I'm going to repeat this for my listeners so that they know how excited I really am to have you on this podcast. As I told you, I'm not exaggerating. I don't say this to all my guests. I'm so honored and excited because you've become sort of a teacher to me automatically from following your app and reading your books. Mainly because I'm sort of a writing snob, and you're a great writer, and I love the app, and I love your um, I think I think Rick Hansen used this word, but it really is applicable. Um, your sweet teaching style. You and I don't know whether that's too sweet for you, but it's something very encouraging about having somebody be very gentle and sweet with you. So, Henry, thank you.
Well, Wendy, thank you very much indeed for having me on the show. It's really fun to connect with you.
So I shared a bit in the introduction and the brief summary of your bio that although you are quite discoverable out there in the internets as a writer and meditation teacher, I didn't discover you until just recently. Oh, maybe in the fall, last fall, or something like that. But once I did, you've had a profound effect on me, an influence on me as both a teacher and a writer. I found you on Sam Harris's Waking Up app, and since then, I've really been hooked to your teaching style through the app, your app, the Way app. Um, but I also had to read your books, and that's when I got hooked on your writing. And as I told you, I started with your memoir, One Blade of Grass, which is just a beautifully written memoir, which I encourage people to read. And I got hooked because you had a background with chronic eczema like I did. And it was like, oh, this person knows what I went through. And therefore, it was a connection. But I need to add, with no exaggeration, that although I read many books for this podcast, this is my like 117th episode, so I probably read about 115 books. They're all mostly well written and helpful and great, but it was never yours really capture is your writing style captures it. It's like the poetry. It's fun to read. It's not just here's a list of things, here's another list of things, here's a practice you could try. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to read from the forward of your book, which Rick Hansen wrote. He said this about your writing style, and I want to echo it. And this is sort of a tease, so everybody will go out and get this book. But yeah, it works. Um, he is an extraordinary writer who brings you into the immediacy of his own realization. Because he has walked these paths so much himself and in a variety of traditions, he is extremely skillful at dealing with each twist and turn, including for individual needs. Throughout, he is the kindest of teachers, encouraging and commiserating and coaching with both the light touch of his natural sweet spirit and the fearless, penetrating oomph of someone who's experienced the disillusion of ego and has come back with nothing left to lose. So I know he's a friend of yours, but I'm sure he means all that. and, and this leads to an opportunity for you to tell our listeners a bit about what you do, who you are, and what causes and conditions got you where you are right now.
Yeah. Hey, Wendy, thanks for all the above. It's Rick is indeed a very good friend. So take that all with a pinch of salt. Um,
No.
but let me see. I mean, I would never in a million years have imagined that I might end up being a teacher of Zen or meditation until basically it happened, whatever it was, 15, what is it now, 16 years ago or something. Um, I, I was an extremely restless, uneasy human being throughout my childhood and beyond, and when I took up meditation at the age of 24, 25, I had no idea how badly I needed it. I was desperate and desperately unhappy, and I needed something. And it just happened to be meditation that was my first sort of entry into any kind of healing of any psychological, emotional, spiritual, whatever. And I, yeah, it was a process of gradually uncovering just how messed up I was, you know. And, I mean, it had been a thing throughout my childhood and youth and young adulthood in my family. Like, oh, yeah, Henry's just so restless. Henry can't sit still. Henry's doing, while he's doing one thing, he's already talking about the next thing he's going to do, and I may have undiagnosed ADD. I don't know. Sometimes I look back and I think I must have done. But I learned through meditation just painfully, I learned to be still with what was going on. And that I mean that I say that meaning I began to learn that and I'm kind of still learning it. It's like
Yeah.
it's an ongoing thing. But I think what happened to me was just proof that the practices really work if
Yeah.
you stick with them. I think that's the main lesson I learned, that actually if you do what they say, and I say this about, the 84,000 practices or whatever the number really is, I think probably with all of them, if you really do what they say, you're going to get some significant benefit. You can really make inroads into massive, either slight incremental reduction of suffering or massive reduction of suffering.
Yeah.
And in my own case, I've been lucky to have some significant, you know, blows, as it were, from practice that made a big difference that in the end actually lasted. Because many of us who've meditated a long time will know that you can have a you can have some mind-blowing experience in
Yeah.
meditation, or maybe it's not exactly in meditation, but because you're meditating. It might be when you're walking into the supermarket, not when
Yeah.
you're on the cushion, but because you're meditating, you can get these sudden shifts where you lose the ordinary sense of being a tight, frightened, anxious, angry, frustrated, disappointed self, and you just blow out into something much vaster. And if you're lucky, you might a sense of that might remain for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and in some rare cases, it will actually last years, and it can even be a pivot point in a life. But my experience is, yeah, some of those sudden, quite amazing shifts have happened, but it's still a lot of incremental every day. I got to tend to what's coming up, to what's going on, and practice has helped me on both those sides, just doing it. And basically, I don't miss a day, and it's
Yeah.
been that way for probably 30 plus years. So,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
why would you? Is it one of the things, if you do it enough and you start getting into it not being a thing that you think you need to schedule or do. Like I always tell people, like somebody asked me, "Well, how do you meditate every day?" Well, I say, "I do," and I said, when you get up in the morning, do you think, "Oh, I'm very worried about my oral hygiene. I think I'll brush my teeth." You just
yeah,
brush your
yeah,
teeth, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then the
yes,
benefits come,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, exactly, exactly. There's this is a thing that's relevant to that, is a little left field, but I remember once on NPR, probably 15 years ago, hearing an interview with these two economists who'd written a book about dieting, because they said they'd both realized they were getting a bit portly with kind of long lunches or whatever. And so they'd come up with some ways of how to diet. And the number one thing that I heard on this podcast that really, on this radio interview, that really actually I thought, oh man, that's what practice is about, is they said, make the decision, make a big decision upstream. Like, I'm not going to have dessert. That's just a thing. No more desserts. So every single meal, when the dessert menu comes around, you just put it away, because you've already made the decision. I think it's like that with meditation. You've already made the decision
Yeah.
long ago. You do it every day. It's not a decision per day. It's just
Yes.
done. it's just like you're saying with toothbrushing. Who decides to brush their teeth?
Yeah,
It,
because you're in there doing it before you even think about it, actually,
exactly.
truthfully. Yeah, that's a very good thing. I like that. It's making the decision upstream is very
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Wonderful. You said a little bit about like becoming a teacher kind of surprised you and until you were a teacher and then you look it around and you were a teacher. But um before we go too far into the conversation about the app, the book, meditation in general, one of the things that this is just my own personal curiosity, but I think my listeners will love it too, is because one of the things that I like to do on this podcast is I don't consider it because I come from a non-sectarian lineage. I don't, although it's very Japanese Mahayana influenced. My background was 20 years in Tibetan Buddhism. So I have a kind of a range there. And so I don't like to limit any of my podcast episodes to any one thing particularly. So because I think it's really important for people to get sort of a view of the broad expanse of things that might interest them, and
yeah,
and now with the internet, we could anybody who's interested in anything, they can look it up and find out that it's probably a center an hour away or something. So
yeah.
so before we go too far, I'm fascinated, which I never heard about either, was the Sanbo lineage, for which you are a member.
Hmm.
Hadn't heard of it before. What fascinated me was the combination of Soto and Rinzai, um, the lay aspect, but also the emphasis on Kensho. Um, and I think this is getting a little deep, but that's okay. So, Kensho is a concept that many of my listeners may not have heard of before. I can't even remember if it came up in any podcast with like any Zen teacher or not. So if it would be okay with you, if you
Yeah.
could talk more about Kensho and then continue talking about so this is like a triple assignment here. So
Okay.
I'll guide you again if you get lost. But if you
Yeah.
could, Kensho, and realization or enlightenment, uh, all these things can be problematic concerns for new and seasoned practitioners.
Yeah.
I'll quickly add, though, that Kensho may not be a familiar term to some, but I think most people, at least my listeners, have heard about what it's referring to. It's referring to sort of the realization or seeing into your own nature or the nature of life or emptiness or however you want to term it. There's a lot of other um, Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools and lineages who use different practices to accomplish that sort of thing. They don't call it Kensho, like I practice in Tibetan and practice within Dzogchen. That's one practice that talks about seeing your own mind, seeing into your own nature. Another is like the Hindu, like Advaita Vedanta and that sort of thing. But let's stick to, just the general concept of realization, enlightenment, Kensho. Would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, no, let me have a stab. Yeah, so the term Kensho, yeah, exactly. It literally means something like seeing your own original nature or something like that. And it refers to exactly as you're saying, it refers to um an experience of really seeing clearly that, we haven't been the sort of everyday ordinary sense of self that we've lived with that's trying to navigate its way through the world, minimizing pain and maybe maximizing pleasure, or maybe not just pleasure, but all the things that it wants, sort of
Right.
trying to avoid the pitfalls and get more of the potentials, in life. So in a moment of Kensho, suddenly It's as if that sense of self, evaporates, or it's just not arising. Or, you suddenly see, man, it's never really been what I thought it was. It's never been the real solid entity that I felt myself to be. Suddenly I see that it's always been some kind of a mirage, or it's always been just an idea. It's just been a concept. It was this little cluster of concepts. And now I can see that that's all it was. And, it's tremendously liberating. And so
Yeah.
so Kensho, I guess you could say in other terminology, it's a sudden, strong insight into non-duality, into non-separateness, into self, the sense of self and other being two things, or the self and the world being two separate things. It's a sudden moment of really seeing through that. So
Yeah.
where every tradition has its specialities and its precious things, and they're all good. And as far as I'm concerned, so I really love your non-sectarianism. That's something that I'm into as well. And alas, I think a lot of spirituality, even non-religious spirituality, can get pretty sectarian at times. So,
Yeah.
it's a really thing to be aware of, this really pluralist, open-minded pluralist approach. But I would say that what's particular about Kensho maybe is that it's usually got to be quite a strong experience of that to be, well, in those Zen traditions that talk about Kensho, because there's a lot of Zen traditions that don't even talk about it. You
Right.
know, most of Soto Zen actually doesn't talk about it. You know, they'll
Right.
say, well, it's kind of there, but we don't talk about it. But in some schools of Zen, especially Rinzai, you need to talk about it, because the main method of teaching, which is koan training, rests on Kensho. It's like koans make much more sense after Kensho, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so Rinzai Zen will tend to talk about it more openly, and Sambo Zen is exactly as you said. It's a hybrid of Soto and Rinzai. So on the one hand, it really, it sort of reveres the practice of not doing anything, of just sitting
Mhm. The
with no
Soto kind of
aspiration,
view.
yeah, no intention, no purpose, just sitting, reveres that. But on the other hand, it also reveres sitting with a koan and seeing if a Kensho experience happens, and then training in the koans. And for those, it's sort of like people who do that koan track in Sambo Zen, which is, some number do. But actually, when you complete the koan curriculum, the plan is you're basically just going to do just sitting afterwards anyway. It's just to make you better at not just sitting, not doing anything, kind of thing. So, I think a lot of other traditions that are very much non-dual, like you mentioned, Dzogchen and Advaita Vedanta, and I think basically they'd be talking about the
Yeah.
same world, the same realization. They just might be slightly different in the method. From what little I know of it, they can, like Dzogchen, I think, and you must correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that it's more open to just little glimpses and lots of them and more of them, and gradually it gets deeper and clearer and deeper and clearer. And
Different.
whereas the sort of Kensho idea is like one fairly strong, thorough experience, but then ages and ages of making it more stable. So it kind of
Yeah.
amounts to the same thing, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, and that's really kind of interesting, and I think this might be sort of like a little more in the weeds for people who haven't experienced both sides of this, because I have, and it's like, yeah, the Zoshen method was about, I'm going to show you your own mind. Here it is, boom, and and then we may do this again, and if you can grab it again, that would be great. And it's like it always I loved it, and I got glimpses, definitely a non-dual glimpses, or a sense of myself disappearing, or that myself got big and like
Yeah,
expansive, like including the whole world. Like I didn't have a bag of skin anymore. I just, I had those, I call them glimpses,
yeah,
um, but not very stable, I would say.
right.
It was like they sometimes happened, they sometimes didn't happen, and they
Yeah.
didn't sort of keep me glued to that sense of non-self, even I mean theoretically, yes, but in practice, you know
Yes,
what I
yes,
mean?
yes, yes. That's a really good point. Exactly. And yeah, and that's one of the big hazards or things we have to watch for, I think, in this kind of practice is like it's quite easy to get an idea of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I get that everything's part of one great consciousness. Okay, I've got that now. I've got that now. But really, have we got it as an experience or have we just got it as an idea? And I think probably for many of us, a lot of the time it can be a mixture of both. There's some idea in there and there's some experience in there. It's always a work in progress, isn't it? I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it absolutely is. But as I hinted at, though, at the beginning, is like, and I told you, I've always wanted to do a deeper dive into koan practice, but it's pretty hard to find a teacher, especially where I am, who, first of all, Rinzai is not as out there and available as Soto Zen. And I even asked my teacher who studied in both, and I said, will you be my teacher in koan practice? And he said no. But I respect that. He's passed now and he's very precious to me, but I know what he was saying. He wasn't trained in guiding me through a koan practice. And not that I would stay with it, but the koan practice in your app is is exactly what you emphasized. And this I think is important to say again. You said, well, you go through the koan track, but then you come back to just sitting. It's kind of like first there was a mountain, then there was no mountain, then there is a mountain, right? Is it it
Exactly.
it's just like that.
Yes.
Um and I'm through many of I don't know how far I am in your app because I can't figure out how far it goes right now, but it's like and then after the wild world of koans or whatever you called it, you go back to basics again, back to breathing, and it's like I just find it so stable and so important because as I mentioned to you, Henry, I think before we started recording, this app, and I really want to encourage people to check it out. I think some you could even share like a couple of lessons or something, which I'm happy to do with my Sangha and so forth. But is that it's something different than all the other apps out there. And I've listened to all the other apps because podcast listeners write to me and say, what would you recommend? Which also I feel ridiculously unprepared to give them an answer. So I like to try to sample everything. And everything has too many choices. And like I said, it's like your app takes away the tyranny of choice. It just gets you on a path and anchors you to the path. And I think that then encourages that brush your teeth, meditate thing, right? It's not like, oh, I feel like listening to this person today, or I feel like listening to this person today. That's just not what I don't think it practices what is meant to be, and it can't get you stabilized on one path long enough to actually accomplish anything. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. I think it's like we can we could start meditating. A lot of people, I think, start meditating because they want some of the peace it can bring. And so they do it when they feel like they need peace.
Yeah,
you know
that's
and I mean
right.
that's very natural. Why wouldn't you? So I'm really stressed today, I'll do a meditation. 2 weeks
Right.
go by and then okay, I want a meditation on focusing better at work. Okay, so I'll do that. I want a meditation on anxiety, I'll do that. I want a meditation on sleeping better, I'll do that. And that's I mean that's okay. That's if that's what they want to do, that's great, and it's great that they're even doing that at all. I think any
Exactly.
meditation is better than none. But it's not the really, really fruitful way of meditating. And it sounds like I think you're going to agree with this, but the really fruitful way is to say, I am what I am, this cluster of some things about me are really good, some things about me are a bit of a mess, and I'm reactive in certain ways that I wish I wasn't, and whatever, and I sure as hell know that somehow I could be enjoying life more, and I know I'm not around here forever, and it's a great gift to be alive at all, and couldn't I be appreciating it more, and so on.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to get on this path of training that's ancient, and it doesn't have to be that I'm training to be an adept at sitting in a cave on a mountain. Not at all. This is for life, for everyday life. I love the name of your podcast is exactly right. Everyday Buddhism. That's what this is really for. But if I'm on a path of training, I get multiple benefits. They just gradually start emerging, not because I'm aiming for them, but because I'm doing the
Yeah.
practice every day. It's like, it's like if you wanted to learn to play the piano, the teacher would say, you got to do your chords, you got to do your arpeggios, you got to do your scales every day. Not, I feel like playing Beethoven today. And
Yeah.
now tomorrow I feel like playing Bach. No, it's not like that. I mean, you'll get to Beethoven and Bach by doing your scales every day. So it's really analogous to that. So, with this app, me and my nephew Jack, who happens to be a really brilliant and skilled leader of small teams. He's really good at it. He's the CEO. He's also a really keen kind of newish meditator. I think 2 or 3 years he's been meditating. And we decided, man, let's make this like Duolingo, the language learning app.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you're on a path. And because it's actually very logical for meditation. You're on a path. You don't keep choosing what to do. We just really, in a way, how could you possibly know? So
That's it. That is exactly it.
so we lay it out for you. And it may not be for you, and that's okay. You find another app where you do get lots of choice. But in our case, we're going to offer a training, and it'll take actually the whole pathway. We're designing it to be basically 3 years long, and then there's more. And after that, you're going to get to start having a little bit of choice, but
Wow.
not until
So
you've
I got a
done.
ways to go then. I've been
Well, it
about
depends how many
it.
you do a day. If you do, you could accept an old hand like you could rush through it all if you want. But
No, no, I repeat things too. So
that's what a serious, wise meditator would do is actually go slower and repeat.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
I love the repeating aspect. I love that, actually your app just got an update where you could put your own special things in there. I like that part. So because I
Yeah.
can bookmark and create my own little list, right? So
Yes.
so I shouldn't be telling people all this stuff until they've experienced your app, but that is exciting, and I think it's brilliant, and I really would encourage people because you know, one of the things is I think people think it's harder to get on a path and stay on a path and do this than it really is.
Right.
Like you said, there's some people might sample your app and say, "Oh no, no, this is not for me." But some of the reviews I've seen about your app echo what I've been saying, that they didn't think they could do it and now they're on it and they just love that they're just sort of taken through it and they don't have to think about what the next step is because it, I don't really feel responsible for making that choice for myself. You know what I mean? And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So it's just great.
Yeah, and and I think there's another aspect to it, which is that really recognizing that it is a journey, it is a
Yeah.
path, rather than meditation being an intervention. I'm just gonna give myself a hit of meditation because I need it now. To really get the sense that no, it's a deep journey. I mean, my experience is the journey of a lifetime.
Yeah.
I think if I hadn't been on this journey of daily sitting for whatever it is now, 35 years or something, my life would have been kind of such an even larger, worse mess than it has been.
No, I know you do. You look back. You don't think too if you do get on a path of serious meditative training.
Yeah.
y- you don't you kind of don't realize, like, it's kind of like maybe going to the gym or something. It's like you kind of don't realize, or I like the keyboard analogy because I do the keyboard too, so and I don't like arpeggios. But anyway, so it's like you don't realize that progress is happening because it's slowly happening. But like you said earlier in our conversation, it's like the aha moments don't always happen when you're on the cushion, or in my case on a chair. um, they happen when you're walking into the grocery store, or when you're about to yell at somebody on the freeway and you don't, or whatever, right?
Yes.
So
Exactly, exactly, exactly. I sometimes think it's like really, it's like we're tilling and tending the soil, just
right,
patiently kind of slightly improving the soil, and gradually different lovely plants are growing because
yeah,
we're tending the soil.
that's
And
right.
you can't rush them.
No, no,
You
you
know?
can't. You can, and it's not a drag either once you get on a path that feels comfortable to you. So,
Yeah,
but this actually leads us to more about just meditation in general. Okay,
okay,
um,
yeah.
sort of, and it sort of leads me to ask you about the whys and whats, which we've got into a little bit of it, but I'll lead into that with another quote from your book from you, because this is what you said about meditation, which I think is 100% aligned with my mission of this podcast. So that's why I had to share this quote. I put a lot of stars and highlights in the book. Um, Meditation is a clear, deep stillness that can meet our most profound spiritual yearnings exactly and fully. No special buildings, no rituals, priests, doctrines, or dogmas, no machineries of institutional power, just you, your own space, and a commitment to be quiet and still for a while. Yet you emerge from it feeling spiritually fulfilled, right in the middle of your ordinary life. So, Henry, say more.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, my deep conviction is that we all have it all already. We have boundless, infinite love. We have boundless, infinite compassion. We have boundless, infinite awareness, boundless space. We're all inclusive. We're completely, I don't know, part of everything.
Right.
And so the idea that we need to entrust all of the great spiritual experiences that we are automatically are our birthright. That we have to entrust them to, I mean, crusty old men in smelly robes. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm saying that because I'm thinking of when I was a kid and church. I mean, I
Oh,
was I
yeah.
was I was brought up an atheist actually, but that
Mm.
didn't mean that there wasn't elements of religion in my upbringing. Like in England, all the primary schools are owned by the Church of England. The
Ah.
state
Hmm.
primary schools, not like we call it elementary school here. They're actually part of the Church of England. They're all named after saints. I went to Phil and Jim, which was St. Philip and St. James's School. From the age
Phil
of
and Jim.
age of 5 to I don't know 10 or 9 or whatever it was, 8, whatever it was. Um, and there was a hymn every morning, you know,
Wow.
and there was
Yeah.
a prayer, and that was just across the board in English education. And so we were exposed to it, but I found it like intelligent, thoughtful, rational, wise people. What are they doing with these crazy stories? Why are they sort of suddenly pretending to believe them when in every other area of life they're rational and
Yeah.
reasonable. And then suddenly, so anyway, and then yeah, occasionally being dragged to a Christmas service or something, and I don't know, it was it didn't work for me. So actually, I shouldn't be rude about it. It just didn't work for
No.
me. I don't want to be sectarian against anything either myself.
Right.
Well, there's a few exceptions. There are a few exceptions.
Well, it's like that's like the old question, and we'll get on to original love and next, I think, just to tease that. But it's the old question about it's kind of like the question of enlightenment, but it's also the question that I get asked: is Buddhism a religion? And that really can set up a whole maelstrom of nonsense, in my mind.
Yeah.
It is for some people, it is for some cultures, and even if you're not in the culture that it is a religion, somebody can feel like it is a religion because that word spirituality, I think, is like I think it's about as yeah, it works, but it for me it doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? It's just
I, I feel exactly the same. I used to, when I was first, appointed as a teacher by my teachers, I used to try to find the word, and I'd use the word existential because you're studying your own very existence,
yeah.
and but that was a bit weird too because I know in the US especially existential usually is taken to mean whether you can exist or not, whether you're under
Yeah,
threat of being.
dread. Yeah,
Yeah.
existential dread.
Right. But I grew up like in Europe, it was more about like the existentialists. They're just studying
Oh, good
existence
point. Yeah.
itself. But the word spiritual is what we seem to be sort of lumped with, but it doesn't have to mean you believe in spirits, obviously. It means that
Right.
it's sort of psychology, but kind of a bit more than psychology, and it's not religion in the sense that in order to be spiritual, you do not have to subscribe to any doctrine or dogma at all. And
Yeah.
I mean, you'll know this how great it is in Zen that it's like the less you believe, the better. In some ways, the whole program is to let go of beliefs. You know,
Yeah, yeah, and but you do something very different in your program and your book, which leads us to original love, the four ins on the path of awakening. And let me stress it's the word INN, as in lodging, or in this case, refuge or shelter on the path of meditation. But to me, you know, I've been so involved in Buddhism for so long. I came to it. I think this is the case for a lot of people. I came to it to a period of uh, after my mother's sudden death, and it was like you're lost in grief, and I was always a book Buddhist for years and years and years and years, but never made any commitment to any practice, or I didn't go find a teacher, or I didn't go to a center. But then I dove in head first, and the story was written. But it because I had that sort of association with it, I've always thought of it in my case as a religion in some way, because the term spirituality seems fluffy, and it doesn't have a lot of heart or love, or I don't feel anything, maybe is what I'm trying to say. Where if the word religion it feels very deep and profound, and well, and your book talks about this. It feels loved, and feels, and it's not just like, oh, I'm just dabbling in this spiritual exercise. You know what I mean? It's like I am committed, and it is what's driving my life and making my life better, and not such a miserable mess that it used to be. So I would love you to talk about your book, and you called it a meditation program, about original love. Number one, what are the four ins? Are mindfulness, support, absorption, and awakening. And and then maybe start the discussion by explaining what original love is, because I think a lot of people, I especially imagine a lot of, secular listeners of my audience, or, sometimes they get even turned off by me saying uh, religion or God, or I call the F word faith, or because I don't think I would never keep coming back to Buddhist practice if I didn't have faith at some point that this was a
Mm.
good thing for me to do, right?
Yeah,
So love is a tricky word like that. It
yeah,
has connotations that might be confusing
yeah,
to people, especially in this context. So, you know,
yeah.
tell us about the book and what that love means or feels like or whatever.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, so first the term original love. I mean, here's why I came up with that term. I wanted to use it. Um, there's this experience we've already mentioned, Kensho seeing original nature.
Right.
Now, in Zen history, that original nature has had different labels. One of the labels that it had is original face.
Nice.
And there's a famous koan about, have you seen your original face, which you've had since before even your parents were born, let alone before you were born. So that's just a poetic way of talking about Kensho, of
Ah,
seeing the timeless, what has no beginning, no end. Maybe we could think of it as the primordial awareness, or the non-dual awareness, where there's if we're deep in it, there's no space, there's no time,
right.
and beautiful. So if that's original face, I've found any time that I really sort of dropped into it deeply, when I came out, there'd be an incredible feeling of love,
That's right.
just like everything's loved. Everything is love, or the very fact that everything's existing out of nothing is an act of love. But that's not saying there's a deity or any kind of being doing it. It's like
Right.
in the very nature of existing, there's a kind of bedrock foundational love. That's somehow the very fact of existence is just some kind of love generating everything. Now, some will take exception with that, and some might agree, but that's why I called it original love, because I wanted to just convey the emotional side
Yeah.
of Kensho, and of deep feeling of union with everything. And that's a very, it has an effect on the human heart to find
Yeah.
that. We never, I mean, the first time it happened to me, an experience of that kind, I felt like, I was made of the universe, and I belonged so much in the universe that I could never not belong, and
Yeah.
that feeling of belonging I felt like I'd been reclaimed by a timeless love that had always been here, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's probably a bit poetic, but I think it's also got a psychological truth to it, that there's a incredible sense of homecoming that these experiences can bring to us. So that was the starting point. I'm just going to quickly, I'm nearly
Oh,
done,
through the,
Wendy.
yeah, yeah.
But so then I started realizing that if you've had a lot of exposure to a tradition where there's a lot of emphasis placed on some kind of special non-dual experience, well, that's okay. It's got its truth to it, but it's not great, because what if you don't get that experience?
Yeah.
Is your practice then invalid? Should your whole practice be about having that experience? No, it shouldn't. you know, this practice is always about here and now, just as it is. So, so
Right.
that's why I said, okay, yeah, there's awakening. That's number four. But there's one, two, and three. And by the way, these are not in any kind of sequence of value. And they don't even need to be in a chronological sequence. They're just different dimensions of our practice. And so, I put mindfulness first, because that's what most of us know, and if
Right.
we're curious, that's what we'll find first. And in a way, every time we get a deeper sense of mindfulness, I think even there's usually some little flavor of tenderness, that we're letting things be. We're not fighting so hard against something. We're
Yeah.
not resisting so much. And that little surrender or yielding to the way things are, it's got a flavor of love.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, because it gives you that sense, and this ties into the next in, I think, support. It
Yeah.
gives you that sense that it's okay for everything to be as it is.
Yes.
And I'm not going to fall apart. The world's not going to fall apart. It is as it is.
Yes.
And we're
Yes.
mostly not comfortable with that feeling at all.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
that's perfect.
Exactly. And then in that second in, it's all about connection and support. It's realizing that there's a vulnerability in receiving support and being open to support. And but that's, as it's often been said, if we want any kind of recovery of any kind, we're going to need support.
Yeah.
Support is such a key ingredient. And I wanted that in there because there's so many people these days who think meditation is a solitary thing. I got to
And
just,
Buddhism is a solitary thing.
yes,
Right. Even though the
exactly.
three jewels are, you know, centered around, well, not centered, the
Yeah,
third is Sangha. I mean, it's
yeah,
like a
yeah.
lot of people just kind of skip over that.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Having community, having support, having connection, it often I find when people say, "Oh, I'm really stuck in my practice," I ask, what kind of connection with other practitioners do you have? Well, I don't really have any. I just do my meditation.
Ah,
Well, there you go. You know,
uh-huh.
Probably the next step is to find a friend you can talk to about your meditation practice. Or
Yeah.
maybe you join a group, or maybe you don't even join a group. You just go to a group now and then, you know,
Yeah.
just have that little bit of connection with others. And then that can become deeper. We can start realizing our interconnectedness with everything,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
beautiful, and that's a kind of love as well. At least there's a flavor of love in it.
Yeah. Now, I think the things that are the most tricky, I think well, actually, mindfulness, I think, is pretty obvious, because most people are familiar with that and come to it that way. Support, like you said, some people are like, not so much. They don't get the importance of it. But absorption, I mean, unless you do jhana practice, I don't think people, and that's sometimes a term that people wouldn't even know what that is either. But absorption, I think, is something I would like you to say a little more about. And then, awakening is the big kahuna, and then that gets everybody all weirded out. So,
Yeah. So, absorption practice, what I'm really referring to here above all is that if once people have been meditating a little bit regularly, they may find a lot of times I've heard this as a teacher, people report this. Henry, last Wednesday, I was doing my sit and I was doing exactly what I normally do, but suddenly in the middle of it, it was easy. I could just ride on the breath and it was effortless and it was so beautiful. I was very clear. It was this lovely peace and calm and clarity, and I was totally attentive. I was doing the practice perfectly. And then I was back to normal, you know. And and what was that? I said, well, that was a moment of absorption. It's like samadhi in Buddhist
right.
terminology. It's a moment of, I think basically it's flow. It's a flow state coming on in meditation. When
Yeah. Well, you can
suddenly,
have a flow state if you're writing or doing anything creative. I mean, I know I've like just started writing and like I didn't even know I was thinking that. Where did that come from? Oh my goodness, I've just written 10 pages and
yes,
it doesn't even sound like what I was thinking about. Where'd that
yeah,
come from?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. It's exactly that kind of flow experience, but in meditation. So, so there's a ton of great research onto flow in activity
Right.
of different kinds. It's just that in meditation, Well, you could say meditation is a kind of activity, sure, but we sort of can get it without an obvious outward activity.
Yeah.
In meditation, it's like I think of it as like it's flow in being,
Yeah.
and
I like
it's
that.
and it's a sweet thing to find, and I think it's I feel it's worth calling out as a really important dimension of practice,
Yeah.
because it's so nourishing and it's so cleansing and rejuvenating, to drop into that. And as you say, there is then, yeah, for the people who really like going down a rabbit hole, there's the whole thing of what they call jhana practice, where you deliberately cultivate these different, slightly different degrees of absorption or of jhana, they call it, but it means of samadhi or flow in meditation, and it can get more and more refined and wider and wider, and they're beautiful states, and I did a deep dive into them over a couple of years, and I really enjoyed it. It was really beautiful, and I still go into them now and then when I'm sitting deliberately and not deliberately.
Yeah, I
Um,
heard you speak of it on speaking with Sam Harris on Waking Up. I've heard you speak of that, and it's like I've never tried it or even thought of it, but I've had people on the podcast who are practitioners in that too. So I mean, I know it's something, but I have arrived at that feeling that you're talking about in meditation
yeah,
multiple times. It's not,
yes,
although it can be very disappointing for people who, if they think that it's out there and then they're grabbing at it, it's like you're not
yeah,
going to get it that way. It's just not going to happen. It's be like me saying, okay, I'm going to sit down and write the next chapter of my book, and it's going to be perfect. And it's like,
yeah,
well, right then I've just messed it all up. I won't be able to write one sentence, right?
yeah. Exactly, exactly, exactly. The more we seek it, the further
It
it
goes.
withdraws. Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So what about awakenings? Like I said, that's
Yeah.
how do you explain awakening in the four ends?
Yeah, well, here's my take on it, and this is based a lot on my own Zen teachers, and Zen tradition, and somewhat in Advaita Vedanta practice, a little tiny little snippets of Dzogchen, but it's basically discovering some. It can be awareness that just doesn't seem to have a center
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
doesn't seem to have an edge.
Yeah. No edge.
Yeah. It's also it can be just an overwhelming sense of non-separateness. That it's like, somehow this body is is all matter. That, like you said it beautifully, actually, there's this me doesn't it doesn't have the boundary of the skin bag. It's a
No, no edges.
huge,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
like I did. I think you credited him as well on Unified Mindfulness, Shinzen Young.
yeah.
I did a lot of see hear feel practice
Oh, I
years
love that.
ago, and trained at the a little bit to be a trainer for just the beginning stages. I didn't go too far, but enough so that I could guide someone in that practice.
Yeah,
And they were they were big on focusing on sort of like no edges and sort of getting so you're looking at the back of your head, and Zochen does that a little bit too. And it's like I found it quite easy to get into it, and I've worked with other people who have done that, and it's like and they've people have asked me, well, did I just have a awakening experience? And it's like you don't want to tell them no, but you don't want to tell them you want to tell them yes, but you don't want to tell them emphatically yes. It's like
yeah,
people
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's like, oh, now I'm an enlightened being or whatever. And it's I always say, yes, you did. You had a glimpse of it, and I don't know if I'm full of. I shouldn't say that. Yes, you
yeah.
did. You had but you can call it
Yes.
a glimpse of enlightenment.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I mean, I guess one thing here is that it's always here. So why wouldn't we be able to have a glimpse of it?
Yeah,
You know?
right.
Yeah. But there's just because we've had a glimpse doesn't mean there isn't still a long path to, wow, integrating it, to having it be more stable, to having access to it be more stable, staying
Yeah.
open, you know? I mean, because we could have wide open access to it, but we just don't think about it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, because you're busy being reactive or whatever, and
exactly, exactly.
because you're human. So yeah, that I think you explain all that beautifully, and um it does make me feel more comfortable in explaining some of these concepts in the way you've explained them. Um, we're getting to the end of our time here, Henry, and but there's like a probably 1,001 things I'd like to talk to you more about, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. And as I mentioned to you off mic, off recording, is that I will post links and our show notes to listeners that you can find out more about Henry, find about the app, find out about the books, The Original Love. Is there anything you wanted to add or anything you wanted me to emphasize for the listeners?
No, that's really kind of you, Wendy. I just feeling actually when you ask anything I want to add, I want to just say I'm feeling called to just say something about love again because
Okay.
I sort of somehow feel um this is totally I'm a non-theist completely. I mean, basically I'm an atheist, you know.
Right.
But I still believe that love is kind of endemic to our existence. It's like
Yeah.
in the very somehow core of our being and of
Yeah.
our existing. And I can't exactly explain it because I just have no belief in a God. But
Right.
I do experience a kind of boundless love quite often, and
Yeah.
feel that there's this, I don't really understand it. There's this great sense of belongingness, and that is like love. And I think it's a really important thing because when we're feeling love, lots of things change in our neurology and in our psychology and in our well-being just to be feeling even a little bit of
Yeah.
love. It brings tenderness, it brings gratitude, it brings appreciation, it brings a sense of safety, it brings a sense that even though things may be disastrous and really difficult, somehow, even in the midst of that, things are okay. So, and I'm saying I feel all of that without having. I mean, I really respect you calling it religion. I really like that. But you're meaning religion in a slightly different sense from the way that I think of religion, where it's really dogmatic and there's a,
Dogmatic and doctrinaire and
yeah,
yeah.
an
Yeah.
authoritarian, and you got
Yeah,
to
I hear
believe
you.
us, or yours doesn't sound like it's anything like that.
No, it isn't. It was the only word I've ever been able to grab for how that feels. Maybe
Yeah.
I should start calling it original love.
Well, it sounds quite similar to what I'm meaning by original love. That it's just that I really believe there's a, no, I don't believe it. I experience that there's just kind of a deep truth and beauty and goodness in our very being, in the very fact that we exist at all. And I think it takes a lot of practice, and I'm still on the path of learning to live that more fully
Yeah.
and more wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and also, when I first saw the title of the book, Original Love, I thought, and then when I heard you on a podcast saying it was like it was a poetic way, kind of tying to what was your original face before your parents were born, I thought you were playing on the original sin instead
Ye-
of our original sin, original love. And I've always said in my podcast and in talking to people, I've always said, well, sometimes Buddhism gets a bad name because it's focused on suffering, but I think it needs the best name because it's focused away from original sin and on Buddha nature, which is inherent original goodness.
Exactly. Just that's what I was trying to convey, really, by original love. It is exactly instead of original sin.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
what I thought you meant when I read it. I thought, how clever is that? But I wasn't very clever because it wasn't what it was.
Well, no, that's part of it. That was in the background as
Uh,
well.
okay.
Totally. Yeah.
Is it okay, Henry? Is there anything else you want to plug, like how about your app? I mean, I'll put a link to all that, but there are ways for people to get like a glimpse of it without signing up for it.
Yeah. You can get 12 free sessions.
That's what I thought I
Um,
saw. Yeah,
yeah,
12
and
free.
actually everybody can have a scholarship. You just have to ask.
Okay,
Um, so it's, we want it to be sustainable, and it more or less is at the moment. But we also want it to be maximally available and accessible. Yeah.
awesome. That's wonderful. It was wonderful to talk with you, Henry. From a selfish, personal point of view, like I said, I've considered you sort of a teacher, so it's a thrill to have you on the show. But also, I think the way you teach came through today, and it will inspire listeners of this podcast to pick up your book, get your free sessions of the app, and so forth. So, thanks again, Henry, for sharing your time with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I've really enjoyed it a lot.
That's it for our episode with Henry Shukman. I'm sure it was helpful to you. It's talking to him is and reading him and experiencing his app has been quite beneficial to my life. So I hope it has the same influence on you. So next, some plugs and reminders. Consider subscribing to my Substack to receive continuing chapters of my new book, Living Life as It Is, Looking for Right View in the Fog of Delusion. It's my second book, which I'm sort of writing on Substack in hopes of testing the waters for releasing it eventually. And the links to the Substack are in the show notes, of course. And if you subscribe to my Substack, not only will you get the serial book postings, but will also get the Words from My Teachers podcast. You can support my Dharma work for only $5 a month or $40 annually through the Substack. And now there's some new announcements. If you didn't catch them the last couple times for our Everyday Buddhism community, we have opened up our community through Patreon. Patreon will make it more open and accessible for all supporters of this podcast who might like a place to hang out with others. As Henry emphasized, support is a necessary part of practice. Membership tiers have lower suggested donations, and one tier includes the free subscription to the Everyday Buddhism Substack, where you'll find my new book as serial posts, my other podcast, Words from My Teachers, a Zen koans for Everyday section, and other articles and practice areas. I hope you check out the new Patreon community where we have many places for discussion and support, including the Everyday Sangha that practices and learns together on the first Saturday of the month at 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and a drop-in gathering for more support on the third Saturday at 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. You can support this podcast and the other activities of Everyday Buddhism by becoming a Patreon supporter. If you don't follow me or Everyday Buddhism on any social media platforms we post in, you can go to the Everyday Buddhism website and become a member by joining the Patreon community. Just go to www.everyday-buddhism.com and click on the link that says membership. Or you can join through Patreon at patreon.com/everyday Buddhism. Links to joining are posted in the show notes. I thank all of you who contribute. This podcast, the community, and the Sangha depend on your donations to continue to exist. I do not seek podcast sponsors and do not ask for financial commitments through paid podcast memberships. So my work and the cost needed to support what I do is entirely self-funded, except for your donations. Please consider a one-time or continuing donation through Patreon or on my website's donate tab. Or you could buy me a coffee on the coffee cup link on the website. You can find these links in the show notes. And thanks, too, to all of you who write in with comments and questions. Another way you can help is to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It's important to share this podcast with others if you find it helpful in your life. And if you could, take a minute to comment so people will know why you like everyday Buddhism. Well, should I say why you love everyday Buddhism? That's all for the announcements. So until next time, keep finding ways to make yours and everyone's days better.